I had no means of education to speak of. I was born on St. Patrick's Day, 1832, in the village of Percy, Maine, near North Shields. That was the time of the Great Colliery Strike. My father was one of the leading men among the miners of our village, and was trying to keep peace between his workmates and the cops, was shot dead outside the Pineapple Inn near Churton. My mother Bella was left with 8 children, of whom I was the youngest, only 4 months old. When I was 7 years of age, I went to work down the pit, but even the mere pittance that I earned was of importance to a family such as ours, for those were times of desperate poverty. I became a trapper boy. That's to say, I sat all day long by a door used for ventilation of one of the passages of the mine, opening it and closing it as the trams and rollies went through. I worked from 12 to 16 hours a day in the bowels of the earth, seeing daylight only on Sundays, for this was a life of work and sleep. That's when I taught myself to write. Mostly I sat in complete darkness, but occasionally a kindly miner would give me the end of his tallow candle, which I stuck against the wall with a bit of clay. At such happy seasons, I amused myself by drawing figures upon the trapdoor and trying to write words by copying them from handbills and notices I found from time to time. I'd learned to read on Sundays. This wasn't at Sunday school, but in our own garret. My mother was too poor to buy Sunday clothes for me, and I didn't like to go out in my pit clothes, so I sat in the garret and read. I found a few of my father's books there. There was the family Bible, of course, and at 10 years of age, I must have known it all through. In those days, I didn't know there was such a thing as poetry, but the older lads in the pit, the putter lads as they were called, had a habit of ballad singing. It was seldom that they knew a ballad right through, but they used to sing snatches of ballads and songs at their work, and these fastened themselves in my memory. Their incompleteness dissatisfied me. I wanted them all, as I couldn't obtain them. I used to fill them out there and piece the fragments together, and so give them a completeness of their own. This patching up of old ballads was my first effort at verse making. Later on, I was to attempt to fit me words to old tunes. I don't doubt that the lintel of the old ballads has given a tone to whatever music my verse may be supposed to possess. There was, I think, more love for ancient ballad poetry in those days than there is now. I was in my 15th year when I found that an uncle of mine had a small library. I borrowed Paradise Lost. They laughed at me when I took it away. "Why, Joe," said my aunt, "they'll never be able to understand that." Well, I replied, I mean to try. That book was a revelation to me. I was entranced by it. I thought of nothing else, night or day, and I believe I accepted the book as a narrative of fact. My enthusiasm encouraged my uncle to open his whole bookcase to me. In this way, I came across Pope's Iliad and Lindley Murray's grammar. The latter was of great service to me in my situation. I don't believe that I was aware of any grammatical deficiencies at that time, but I must have convinced myself that there was a correct way of writing and a wrong one, and that this grammar was intended to teach the right way. It somehow seemed most necessary to learn. I began to make occasional visits to the book market at Newcastle, walking there and back whenever I had a Saturday off work. I met a bookseller named Turner, who one day asked me, "Joe, have you ever read Shakespeare?" I'd never heard of him. He pressed Shakespeare upon me. He had a copy for which he wanted 5 shillings. I was then 17. All my earnings were given to me mother except for a shilling a fortnight. I saved up for 10 weeks and was then able to take Shakespeare's works home. This book altered the complete aspect of the world to me. Whole passages rang in my mind. I used to recite them to the other lads in the pit, and I was half crazed for the stage, though I'd never so much as seen a theatre. I began with The Tempest and read right through. I think the comedies and histories fascinated me most. It was from Shakespeare that I obtained my chief knowledge of English history. There was another work that was very useful to me in a different way. Chambers' Information for the People was coming out in penny numbers. I was nearly 20 when I came across Emerson's essays, and this was another great awakening and sustaining force. Just before this, I'd begun to write down some of the verses that I made, and here I ought to explain that I never wrote anything with a view to publication. I made verses because it seemed a natural and delightful thing to do. Sometimes the thing would be months in shaping itself in my mind. I'd write it out when I got the opportunity. but I never sat down with any deliberate intention of writing poetry. Writing was merely a transcription of what had taken shape already. Many of my smaller pieces were composed as I was walking to and fro from the pit, and some of these have been praised as amongst the best I've ever written.